someone just posted on Threads recently, this YouTube influencer who's literally just the son of a billionaire. And so he makes videos about being the son of what it's like to be the son of a billionaire.
Brilliant.
And it's like 24-hour trip to Australia in a private jet. Here's what it looks like. And it's got like, I don't know, more than 500,000 views or something. It's just ridiculously hilarious.
Yeah, that's peak Instagram content. I'm surprised that more of those people don't do that.
I don't know. I guess they don't need the money. What news stories mattered most this week in the world of media and advertising? I'm Jack Benjamin, reporter for The Media Leader.
And I'm Omar Oakes, editor-in-chief of The Media Leader.
And this week, we'll be discussing ITV's generative AI TV ads, Roblox's progression into advertising, and much more. But first, Omar, the big news that we've been tracking this week is that Origin, the new cross-media measurement tool led by Isba currently, launched beta testing for the first time. I'm just curious, what would you say are the most significant details of this beta launch? And should advertisers care more than when they had launched the alpha launch previously, alpha trials?
Yes. As far as people within Origin are concerned, it has launched. This has been years in the making. This is a massively ambitious world first for media and advertising, a platform which has the ability, enables advertisers to measure media across different media channels without duplicating audiences. It's in beta in the same way that, iPhone launched its latest iPhone software in June, but it is the real thing. So they're planning to roll it out market wide early next year. But this is very much the product. So, there may be some bugs. That's why you do a beta launch ahead of the final thing. But this is it.
And so I mentioned that they had done alpha trials that had incorporated 5 advertisers. The beta or beta, as I guess you say, has 35 major advertisers. And one of the core differences is that the alpha trials used synthetic data, whereas the beta trials are using their actual advertiser data. Is that correct?
Yes, advertiser data and JIC data as well, which is where the source of controversy comes from. Regular readers of the Media Leader and industry watchers will know that since its inception, really, Barb has struggled to win the financial backing of the TV broadcasters. TV broadcasters have been measuring themselves via Barb for over 40 years. It's the establishment TV measurement standard. And they've been able to agree thus far for Barb data to be incorporated into Origin. Barb is concerned over how the TV audience data will be compared to other mediums, which they argue do not have the same benchmarks, standard of quality.
So we mentioned this a little bit because you had actually reported the week prior, Kelly Williams from ITV had said something at a ThinkBox event that was sort of saying it's a bit concerning that Origin is using, instead of Barb data, they're using a new Kantar panel, which is a smaller panel. I think Barb's panel was expanded this year to have 7,000 households, and Kantar's has like 2,500 households or around that number. Is there any concern that the quality of that data from Kantar is going to be worse than the quality of Barb data? I mean, I guess what's the sort of concern, I guess, not just from the broadcasters, but then also maybe from advertisers that are testing in Origin?
Well, there are 2 things. So, yeah, number one, as you point out, it's a smaller panel. Both of these panels are being facilitated by Kantar Media. Just to put that out there. So it's not it's not so much who's doing the measuring. Right. Yeah, it's a smaller panel, and yeah, I mean, some quarters have criticised Barb, frankly, over many years for the panel not being big enough, which is why they've increased it to 5,000 to 7,000, as you say. How does Barb actually measure TV audiences? They use a mix of things being directly counted through your internet route, your internet enabled TV. So they're actually going into your router and getting direct data as well as sampling. This panel that Origin has will be a lesser version of that. But there's also, in terms of the standards, Barb commits to MRC standards, as we discussed last week. That means minimum 2 seconds viewed, whereas Origin is going to have a range of standards that the advertisers using Origin can choose. So if you want to have completed views, you can filter for completed views. If you want to have MRC 2-second views, Origin says you can have that. But there'll also be a threshold below that.
Right.
Privately, the broadcasters, Barb, you would ask the question, well, why would you want such low standards? Perhaps that's what digital media measurement, YouTube, Meta, etc. Perhaps that's what a lot of marketers are being accustomed to, but it's definitely not what TV, being part of a cross-media measurement system, it's not what the TV broadcasters want to promote.
Right. They want a higher standard. And is there a concern, do you think, that TV might get undervalued, I suppose, by being as part of Origin next to social media companies, YouTube, Meta, that have a lower standard applied to them?
Well, that's what the broadcasters say. Coincidentally, Sam Taylor, senior marketer from Direct Line Group, and part of one of the Isba AV steering groups, he wrote a piece for us that came out at the same time as this piece of the Origin announcement, kind of trying to reassure the community that Origin would not be a currency. Right, it's a platform where advertisers get to choose, as we've already talked about. But the problem is, it also comes down to funding as well. So, how is Origin being funded? They have this advertiser levy. So advertisers that are participating in this are being charged. But also, if you're an ad agency, you're paying for a Barb subscription as well. So all of the major holding company agency groups are funding Origin, but they're also paying for Barb as well. So it's like, why are we funding two TV measurement platforms? That's going to be the concern over how tenable that's going to be in the long run.
And correct me if I'm wrong, in Taylor's piece, he mentioned that there's still a big place for Barb, that Barb is not doing the same thing as Origin. And so there should be reason to support both, right? I mean, is that actually a concern that advertisers would feel like, hey, why am I paying for both these services? It sounds like they have kind of different potential use cases.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be the key test for this, whether in the long run Origin and Barb can coexist. I mean, both want to develop anyway. We've talked, at length in recent years about C-Flight, the joint video measurement solution that ITV, Sky Media, and Channel 4 have. Barb is now running C-Flight on behalf of all those companies are its shareholders, so it makes sense. But that is developing. We mentioned recently about Lantern, this new way of measuring outcomes against TV ads. You reported for us this week, we might get onto this a little bit, about Barb getting Netflix and Discovery Plus and possibly Disney soon onto this advanced campaign planning hub.
That's right.
So it's all evolving anyway, and it's the industry needs to get better at proving that advertising works. That's why this is also important. You need to remember that whenever the funding disagreements, whatever the rows about measurement standards and how TV traded is in the future, advertisers have been demanding this. They've been demanding better measurements, better ways that they can prove to their CFO that all this money they're spending on marketing actually works. And here's the proof for it.
Yeah, there's been definitely a huge advertiser demand. It comes up at all of our industry events. But also Origin raised an additional £52 million this year expected, something like that?
Not this year. So they've raised £52 million since they began. Okay. So this is over 5 years.
Okay.
But there was very little in the first year, a bit more in the second year, and it's really ramped up in the last couple of years since, because remember, the funding for this originally came from pretty much just Google and Facebook, Alphabet and Meta, but they got some direct contributions from the largest advertisers, and then they moved towards this model where there's a levy now on all the participating advertisers. So it's not 52 million this year, right, but a good chunk of it has come from the most recent years.
And is there anything to be said for the fact that Google and Facebook or Meta were the ones that were originally pushing for Origin, or is that just it's become such a widespread thing now that so many different advertisers are demanding it that it doesn't actually matter where it sort of originated? No,
I mean, over the years, this has been something that's been lobbed at Isba and Origin, that this is a Google, Facebook plot to make their video advertising products as seen to be as worthy as TV. This is some. I mean, we'll get into this at Future of Media London for anyone who's attending, where I'm interviewing Phil Smith, the Director General of Isba. So this has been, his big project since he's been in charge of Isba, and there's been a mandate from advertisers. And you have to remember, so he became the Director General in 2017, and this is off the back of this John Mandel speech. This is well before your time, Jack.
Before my time reporting on media.
Yeah, you were born, you were alive. But in 2015, the former CEO of Grey, the ad agency, John Mandel, kind of stood up at this A&A conference and just launched into this tirade against media agencies, how they were taking kickbacks and they weren't being transparent with advertisers' money and things had to change. And it was huge kind of controversy. So this was the climate, you have to understand, in which there was, massive distrust and accusations about how media in the digital age was being funneled. And we still talk about it, but this had been a really pivotal moment for the industry. And Origin really is the outcome of that. It's a huge story for how the industry has tried to grapple with all this money going into digital platforms in particular, not being counted properly. The old Wanamaker cliche about, half my advertising works, I just don't know which half. It's really trying to break that in terms of being able to deliver outcomes because, in essence, marketing, advertising spend, it should be seen as an investment in sales. It shouldn't be seen as an expense, a cost, but you need to be able to demonstrate that.
Well, we'll keep an eye on how the beta performs, and certainly when the full launch occurs in early part of 2025, we'll of course be on top of that news as well, and maybe catch up and see what advertisers have said that have tested the beta trial. But apart from Origin, there were a number of additional stories that we wanted to cover today, and we will take them off one by one. Omar, you already mentioned, we were talking about Barb just now. The TV measurement company announced it was extending its total campaign planning to include Netflix, Discovery Plus this week. They're in talks with Disney. I'm curious, are those additions significant to Barb's advanced campaign platform? What would advertisers make of that, especially in relation to the other big news this week that we already talked about from Origin?
Yeah, so it's better able to go beyond reach and frequency. So as we just mentioned, Origin really is a reach and frequency post-campaign evaluation tool. So you run your campaign and then you want to see, after looking at the audience, how it performed, deduplicated against different media channels. How did it perform? What am I going to learn for next time? Whereas Barb, its evolution, there've been a lot of calls from some quarters where you need to do second by second planning. These 15 seconds, 30 seconds kind of timestamps aren't good enough, and it's really getting to a stage where incorporating the streaming platforms, better handling their data, where you can really start to deliver real-time performance measurement across those platforms as well, because that's where the incremental value is going to come from. You can go to a lot of conferences, including our own, and hear from the likes of Peter Field and talk about how, especially when you wait for attention, TV works extremely well, but is really great for brand building. But in terms of performance and being able to do things in real time, there's still TV is not getting the investment that it probably would like to. So this is going to help towards it.
And a few extra details. The Advanced Campaign Hub already had Amazon Prime Video in it. So now we're adding more streamers, essentially. And it's interesting that Netflix is involved in this, because Netflix is, or specifically co-CEO Ted Sarandos, has been a bit loud about the need for streamers to lean into TV measurement a little bit more. Perhaps not surprising, because Netflix has pretty good numbers compared to some of its streaming competitors, as we've reported previously, at least in the UK market. He said, Ted Sarandos, at a recent conference in Manhattan, that he was basically pushing for all streaming services to open up, to become more transparent. I'm hoping that other folks in the business will follow suit, is his quote from that. So it's a little bit interesting. Is it as simple as Netflix looks pretty good and wants to say, hey, to our competitors, you also should be transparent because we're going to look a little bit better than you. I mean, is that almost the message, do you think?
Yeah, it probably does suit them to say that. To be fair to Netflix, I mean, ever since when Jeremy Gorman was there as their first kind of head of ad sales, when they launched the ad tier a couple of years ago, they did always make the right noises about leaning into being part of JIC's audience measurement. So it is of a piece with that, but yeah, there's no getting around it because we ran, was it Ampere Analysis? I think it was Ampere Analysis. We ran a piece about 3-4 weeks ago where the sheer scale of how Netflix dominates SVOD usage in the UK is huge. So sorry, forgive me. It was actually Barb. It was the Barb establishment survey, where they go around people's doors and ask them, what streaming services do you use? So sometimes people don't always remember, but you remember Netflix, and that it was something like 80, maybe even 85% of households have Netflix. So it's definitely that if there is a streaming TV utility, Netflix is seen as that for the time being, at least. So it makes sense that they would want to promote that.
Yeah, talked to in the past. I want to say it was Rob Collier at MTM about sort of Netflix is sort of seen as the standard streaming service and then you maybe add and churn through other services apart from that. And that's just simply because Netflix has a huge library of content, especially in the UK, maybe a little less so in the US from what I hear from some of my friends back there, that you can always find something that you'll want to watch on Netflix. And then if you want to watch a specific show that's just come out, maybe on HBO or it would be Sky here, then you just subscribe, watch the show, and then maybe end your subscription. That's a pretty common consumer behavior.
I think that's going to change though, because ultimately it comes down to content, which is dependent on licensing deals or whether you're able to produce lots of original content yourself, right? And in the long run, it's against some pretty big players. Disney, Warner Brothers Discovery, bless them. Amazon. A recent ThinkBox event, you had Phil Chrysler from Amazon Prime running Amazon in the UK, and he was sounding very, very bullish about what they plan to do. They launched their ad tier, I want to say 8 or 9 months ago, but since then they've been quietly. He was making out they're building towards something where they're going to use a lot more of their Amazon MGM properties. They've started airing Champions League football in the UK this season.
That's definitely big.
That's huge. They get first pick of the English team's games on Tuesday night. That's huge. It's huge. So there's a lot more to come from Amazon Prime. So long run for Netflix, they've got that, and also with more people using your Sky interface, Roku, even on Virgin Media, you mentioned consumer behavior. We're moving towards a state of affairs where they're all going to be bundled within whatever meta UI people are using when they turn on their TV. Right. So you're just going to be able to search for whatever you want. And if it's on Netflix or Disney Plus or whatever, it's going to come up.
Yeah, the likes of Roku have already come up with that possibility for consumers. And that would make it a lot easier for consumers. And then, yes, you can kind of be a little bit more agnostic about what you're subscribing to, or you buy them all. And then there's news of course, that we've reported on from the past year of bundling certain services together, like with Disney and Warner Brothers Discovery.
Which in Europe is happening a lot more than in the US, because pay TV operators, they still have less churn in the US, so they're able to command kind of better deals with streaming companies. So we heard a lot about this in our Connected TV World Summit event in March, where in the Netherlands, Netflix and Spotify are quite happy to be part of a bundling platform, where in the UK maybe less so. Sometimes they kind of do limited trials of a Sky or something like that.
Yeah.
So
in the US, I think it was Spotify and Hulu were partnered together for the longest time. I don't know if they still are, because I don't live there anymore. Last thing worth mentioning on that as well, actually, because you mentioned Amazon Prime Video, is they come out with new ad formats just this week. So pause ads, shoppable ads, that's all coming to Amazon Prime Video as well. It's come to a few other streaming services already over the past 12 to 18 months. But so Amazon's got it too. So they're building out that ad platform as well, not just the different content that they're maybe licensing, including sports.
Yeah, and YouTube, I think within the last week, has quietly come out
Yes.
with a pause ad inventory as well. And we mentioned at the end of last year that ITVX were going to start doing this. And you can't escape the ads now.
Ads are everywhere. Sorry, everyone, but people got to make their money.
All right, Jack. Now, reporting you did for us this week, you found that Roblox is in the process of creating a walled garden. What's going on with Roblox? Why is it beginning to more aggressively build its advertising proposition?
Yeah, Roblox is quite interesting because there's really sort of a duopoly in terms of gaming, in terms of advertising, especially targeting younger people. So you have Roblox, which is especially for a younger crowd. And then you have Fortnite, which is maybe for a slightly older teenage type of crowd. And that makes up a tremendous amount of investment in gaming. It's basically, I think it's like 80% some odd of advertising. It's just going to these two games. Wow. So it's an important company to keep an eye on, especially as gaming becomes more and more popular, and it already is hugely popular. So there's been some business pressures, according to people I've spoken with, that have sort of led Roblox to want to get more into advertising. Whereas a lot of the founders initially were not super into advertising, but like Netflix, they just didn't want to be involved with advertising, especially knowing that their platform was very targeted toward kids, especially at the time and still today. But over the past couple of months, they've been increasingly wanting to take control over the advertising ecosystem on Roblox. Previously, you had third parties that had sort of filled a void that Roblox had, in terms of Roblox didn't have a whole lot of advertising that it was doing itself. And so you had a big in-game advertising companies like Anzu being one of them. You could buy billboard ads through Anzu that would be placed on Roblox. And according to someone I spoke with, Anzu ran its last campaign on that platform actually at the end of August. So they've sort of been pushed out. A source told me that Roblox is building, it's in the process of building a walled garden and sort of taking control of the informal advertising ecosystem, making it more formal. They have a recent, just within the past few months, deal that they did with PubMatic to open up programmatic advertising on the platform, which is just making it a lot easier to sort of buy those in-game ads a little bit. But it's a really interesting platform because it is mostly, not mostly kids, 45% or something like that of the platform are under 13s, which creates a lot of issues in terms of what kind of advertising you can do on the platform. In fact, Roblox has said that you can't target under 13s at all on the platform, which they didn't have to do because there's already policies in place, like in like COPPA in the US. There's already restrictions on what types of advertising can be targeted toward kids. But they decided that they don't want anyone to target kids on their platform, so that's taking away a lot of potential audience. That's causing advertisers to be a little savvy in terms of what they're doing, how they're planning on Roblox. But yeah, it's a really interesting one to watch. Yeah,
so lots of money going into gaming. That's amazing. It's just through those two games alone. It's incredible.
Yeah, and there's been definitely a lot of growth in advertising. There's a gaming insights platform called Geek, GEEIQ, that said there were 347 brand activations across gaming platforms in the first half of 2024. 45% of those new activations happened on Roblox. 33% went to Fortnite. So that just sort of shows the scale of there's more activations going on, especially brand activations, and they're basically just going to two games. In other news this week, ITV launched 2 new TV ads created with generative AI.
Mornings can be tough, even for a spud. From the moment you leave home, the day can feel like a squeeze. Work can be stressful, no matter how hard you try to keep up. And by the time you get home, you're ready to collapse.
You wrote about this for us, Omar. Got quite a bit of attention. The broadcaster says AI can help democratize TV advertising by allowing smaller businesses to produce ads. First, I just wanted to gauge your reaction to watching those advertisements when you were writing up this report. I mean, what do you think of the ads that they made using AI?
Well, firstly, listeners, please go to the Media Leader website where we wrote about this on Friday. We've got videos of both ads which they created. And they were quite similar. So they featured one was a travel company where it had like a little passport character with cutesy eyes and arms and legs, who this passport hadn't been on holiday for a while and he really wanted to go on holiday. And the other one was it was a potato who had similar ambitions to do something and finally got to do it. So the creative was actually quite similar. But yeah, it was it had a real person doing a voiceover, and they didn't give too much away, ITV, until in terms of how they actually did it. And they said that it had been tested by System 1 for effectiveness. I asked about what were the results about that, and they weren't able to give me numbers. Viewers, listeners, readers will have to judge for themselves. And at the Media Leader, by the way, we write about the media business of advertising. We tend not to pontificate about what we think is creatively good or not, because, what do I know? So that's why System 1 and the like is useful.
I did want to ask at least about the democratization aspect, though, because in terms of ITV's message to say that, okay, this could allow smaller to medium-sized businesses to advertise on TV a bit more because the creative would be very cheap to produce. How is that compelling, do you think, to smaller businesses? I mean, because a TV ad obviously gets a lot of attention. We talk about the importance of TV ads all the time. But the creative isn't necessarily going to be on par with some of the creative with non-AI generated ads. So is that like a useful trade-off, I suppose, for SMBs? And or if ITV wanted to reduce prices, are there other ways that it could reduce prices to democratize the medium a bit more?
Well, it's about increasing demand, because the thing about broadcaster video on demand, ITVX and others, there's potentially unlimited inventory, isn't there? So you're really in the increasing demand business, whereas in the olden days before the internet, TV companies, frankly, they didn't really have to do a lot of selling. They were really processors of media because you just had so much demand and limited inventory. So it's a whole new world in terms of how these companies are selling things. So they're creating demand. I think there's obviously a first mover advantage that these particular SMEs have, because they stand out. Even if what did you think about the ads?
Well, I thought we weren't commenting on the creative.
Let's move on. But whatever you and I might think about the ads, or viewers at home watching these ads, they are different. And I make that point because what happens when they get really good at selling these Gen AI in-house produced ads, and every company in Warrington starts, using Gen AI to do this, and your ad break is just full of targeted Gen AI created ads, and you create this tragedy of the commons situation.
Yeah, you could definitely see a bit of a race to the bottom potentially, or just that there's just too much of this one type of ad that might be not as high quality as a human created produced ad, right? I mean, that's the concern, is that if you're in a locality seeing all of these ads, you might not really enjoy your consumer experience quite as much. I mean, that must be a risk.
Yeah, because there's so if you're a supermarket advertising within an ad break, you don't want your ad to be preceded or followed by another supermarket's ad break. So, and you trust the media organization to be clever enough to place your ads in such a way that if two ads are kind of similar, they're not going to be abutted against each other. So the same sensibility would surely have to apply to where the generative AI is used. And this is the issue when you start automating, programmaticifying everything, is that you're trusting programs to do this. So you can't move to a situation where you just on your ITVX have an ad break that's just full of Gen AI stuff that's all looking quite similar, and they all have the cutesy eyes, and they all kind of, it's voiceover plus cartoonish stuff.
Various inanimate objects being anthropomorphized and walking around different localities.
Yeah, you're kind of seeing this. I don't mean to pick on YouTubers, because I use a lot of YouTube. I watch a lot of YouTube, and you're kind of seeing this with YouTube spots now, or at least maybe they're just targeted at me, where you're getting a lot of voiceover stuff that sounds like it's been Gen AI, like synthetic voiceover is reading a script that's been created by Gen AI, and it's advertising crypto or something like that. Okay. So it's already kind of like happening in digital media platforms. And again, where any media owner, we've just been talking about Netflix and trying to stand out against its other streaming competitors. Differentiation matters, and it matters for the ad creative as much as it does for the content.
And not to mention the potential copyright concern. I mean, we haven't talked about that. That's a whole Pandora's box. Probably don't have time to talk about that. But let's just assume that's above board for now. But we don't know how lawsuits might play out in the future in terms of the general use of AI for creative assets like that anyway.
Yeah. Jack, how about this? TikTok is rolling out an updated subscription feature for eligible creators in the US and the UK, among other key markets. This feature allows creators to set up a paywall for exclusive content that had previously been offered only to live streamers. Jack, what do you think about this? TikTok becoming a subscription business?
It's really interesting because, TikTok primarily made a lot of its money through their advertising. And now they're letting creators create paywalls and sort of have their own little mini subscription businesses that obviously TikTok can get a large cut of. It's similar to the sort of like Substack model or a Patreon model in terms of people can subscribe to directly fund maybe some creators that they really like. So positive for creators and presumably for consumers. And then also TikTok gets to shave some extra revenue from it. Part of me thinks it's surprised they didn't introduce this much earlier. They had a system in place for live streamers to lock some things behind a paywall. But I don't know how many creators necessarily use TikTok live versus just posting videos. I imagine there's not as many people that are posting live as are just posting videos in general. I think it's really fascinating. Probably good for the TikTok community and for TikTok as a business. But need to talk to more creators to see how much they might be wanting to produce paywalled content. It's the same issue as any business when you start paywalling some content. How do you make that decision as a creator? What to keep free, what to restrict? It's going to be different for every individual creator. But I could imagine people making a tremendous amount of money through this. I mean, people make a lot of money on Substack as it is, but TikTok obviously has even crazier reach. But I would also be curious to know how it affects TikTok's For You algorithm, because a lot of people just only will watch their For You page. It's an amazing algorithm. Everyone gets addicted to it, et cetera, et cetera. Would the algorithm recommend paywalled videos? I'm not sure. It'll be interesting to see how this sort of plays out as more creators use it.
Yeah. Is there a tendency here for TikTok to become OnlyFans?
It's a very serious question. Actually.
Yeah, which famously, was created as a way for, I guess, celebrities to become their own content creators and make money through a paywall. But porn is like water; it finds its way everywhere,
including on TikTok.
Yeah, so OnlyFans is now a porn site. I mean, is that something TikTok wants to do? And if it doesn't want to do, how's it going to stop it?
Well, they certainly haven't said anything one way or another. They do have standard terms of service, and I'm not actually sure about how they restrict potentially lewd content or sexual content on the platform. I've certainly been used by people wanting to spread, if not porn themselves, advertising their OnlyFans to get off of TikTok but go to a different site. People will use TikTok still to just try and market themselves, essentially. So it's a really great question, and it's something that I'll probably be looking into in the near future. Well, I'd be very curious to explore and how TikTok is wanting to deal with that, assuming it crops up, and or what creators might be wanting to do on the platform, how they want to use that subscription business model. In terms of other AI news, wanted to flag a few more stories. So first of all, AI's powered search engine Perplexity is in talks with major brands, including Nike, Marriott, over a new ad model. This startup is looking to compete with Google for Google search. Under the new model, brands will be able to bid for a sponsored question, which features an AI-generated answer approved by the advertiser. So it's an interesting space because once Google started rolling out AI overviews, you knew how were advertisers going to respond to that And was the ad format itself going to need to change, because it won't be as simple as someone types in query and gets article links and you can pay to sponsor some. What do you think of this potential model by a Google competitor, Perplexity?
I very much doubt it is going to be a competitor. That's why there's been already one trial in the US ruling Google as a monopoly, an illegal monopoly over search. And there's one happening right now over digital advertising. It does tend towards being a natural monopoly. I just don't see how offering Nike, Marriott, whoever, the chance to bid for sponsored question, AI generated answers, I don't see how it's going to change anything, because ultimately a search engine is dependent on usage. It's dependent on effectiveness, and Google are still the best at offering an algorithm. You talk to any SEO person, they will tell you that Google is still the best for all. And this is why Google, there is always a kernel of something in their answer. There is a lot of competitive pressure, and because of the humongous resources Google has, it still offers the best product.
But setting aside Perplexity maybe as a competitor, does the ad format make sense? Like, would Google want to do something similar in terms of telling advertisers, hey, you can bid on sponsored questions to ask the AI to generate, a Google AI overview?
Possibly. I mean, you've already had for several years now where the top of search is a sponsored link as opposed to an organic link. But it comes down to usage. I mean, the whole way in which broadly the Google search algorithm works is people have to be linking to your content. It has to be popular content, and they're measuring how much people are actually making sales off the thing they click into, on whether they're kind of bouncing back or whether they're actually staying on that content. They're measuring how useful it is, and it doesn't do Google's business any good if it's just shoving a load of brand sponsored stuff which doesn't actually help the user. If you look at some of the AI generated overview stuff, it's actually pretty good, the ones I've seen so far.
Yeah.
And again, it's the AI, the generative AI thing, it is really just an evolution of search. Just as Google was worried about Twitter 15 years ago when they launched, real-time searches, which is, the thing, but Twitter never got that critical mass use in order to become a real search rival to Google. And I just see it as a natural monopoly where if you want it to be more competitive, you've got to break it up, but it's not going to happen by itself just by offering what might seem to be a more attractive proposition for brands. Anyway, here's another AI story, which I guess I wonder if listeners will find this perplexing. So we have from Deadline, reported today at time of recording on Wednesday, that the Evening Standard, now a weekly. So it's just the Standard. It's just
the Standard, yeah.
The Standard, as we must call it now, because it's no longer a daily. The Standard is looking to quote unquote revive the late art critic Brian Sewell using AI. AI Sewell, as he's been referred to, has reportedly been assigned to review the National Gallery's new Vincent van Gogh exhibition. What do you think? You excited, Jack?
As a journalist, that's pretty dystopian. Essentially saying, instead of hiring a new critic, let's just quote unquote revive someone who's been like a decade past but was a very popular critic of his day, and have him review the thing and just feed the AI a bunch of information about the event. I don't even know how it's gonna, because the AI can't see how the exhibit is actually formatted. I'm not an art critic, so I don't know how you would even review an exhibition, but certainly without eyes it would be very challenging. So come on. I understand. So the broader context is interesting in the sense of the Standard's clearly having issues with its money and feeling the need to cut back on costs, and maybe they're experimenting with AI as a way to potentially do that. And they haven't released AI Sewell, so can't judge them for something they haven't done yet necessarily. But the fact that they're even thinking about it is concerning to me, because it strikes me as instead of just hiring a decent reporter or critic, you're just outsourcing it to the machine. Call me a Luddite if you need to, but that concerns me a bit for the state of publishing, certainly for local brands that are having a tough time making revenues.
Yeah. I mean, you did, they've already revived Elvis Presley, haven't they?
Yeah, I've seen a few things like that.
You've seen some, they, even 20 years ago, they managed to kind of have Oliver Reed in Gladiator, even though he was dead.
Oh yeah,
there's a lot of that has been happening, but I think we're crossing a line in terms of where you actually, why would you read what an art critic has to say? It's because you want their original insight. So I don't think it's the fact that they're kind of reviving someone, but it's reviving someone who's been dead for 10 years and hasn't been alive to allow their critical faculties to develop in the last 10 years. And quite a lot's happened in the last 10 years,
That's a very good point.
So I'm not sure where the data's coming from and how you're updating the computerized brain of Brian Sewell in order to incorporate that. But, it's creativity doesn't just exist in a static moment in time. It evolves. And the Brian Sewell that would still be alive today, I don't actually know how old he was when he died, but I'm sure, if he were alive for another 10 years and still alive today, he would be a different person. Did you know that after 7 years, you are physically a completely different person?
Yes, because your cells have all been replaced.
Because even your bones, your brain cells, they've all kind of regenerated.
It's the ship of Theseus, but for humans. I think the best quote that I've seen, anonymous commenter, sorry, I can't attribute this because I just saw it on, I think it was Threads, however many weeks ago.
So it was a troll.
No. It was a really insightful
troll,
consumer troll, perhaps, reacting to AI use in the creative industry. And the way they said it was, if you didn't take the time to actually create the thing yourself, then why should I take the time to read it? And I think that attitude, I wouldn't be surprised if that, at least for now, is the sort of pervasive attitude around any AI generated creative things, going back to the ITV thing as well, right? People want the human behind a creation. They value the effort, at least, if not the quality. So if you don't put the effort in, really, then why should anyone care? I thought that was agreeable, put it that way.
Yeah, I think two things. Number one, we always discount how amazing still the human brain is as a supercomputer. And we still, all these amazing things we can do with microchips nowadays. And no one talks about the sand crisis that's going on to make all these microchips. Anyway,
that's a Pandora's box.
There's a serious sand crisis. Read The Economist. And also, it's art in particular, or art criticism of art. What really matters is one human communicating to another via the medium of art, and not to get all highfalutin about it, but I think once we actually kind of think about why we enjoy art, why that's a lot of, we talk about television a lot and radio, it doesn't need to be perfect. It's not so much about the technical ability as much as just this other human is communicating. They were talking in the office about Oasis. One of our colleagues has got Oasis tickets. And
very jealous.
Oasis, you might argue, is quite simplistic rock and roll music, but I like Oasis. I loved Oasis when I was a kid, and that kind of doesn't matter. But you kind of built the vibes of the Gallaghers and the band, and we're heading up to Manchester for Future Media Manchester. Can't believe you haven't plugged that yet. And just kind of that time in the 90s where Manchester really felt like it was coming back as the whole country of Britpop. It doesn't really matter about how technically good the music was. It was part of that vibe and our culture and human beings communicating in a different, interesting way to one another. And how can AI replicate that? It can't. There you go. Standard.
Take that. That's all the time that we'll have. But Omar, thanks for joining me, and thank you to all our listeners for listening. We'll catch you next week.